Thanks for joining us for Coffees and Connections for the month of July here with Wolfeboro Parks and Rec. Today we are at Pine Hill Cemetery, and I have with us Ken Franson, who is part of our summer maintenance crew and is kind of heading up the restoration of the cemeteries in town that we maintain. So I'm going to hand it over to Ken. He can kind of tell you what he does.
My name's Ken Franson, as I was just told. I got started working with Parks and Rec on the maintenance crew mowing these cemeteries, and as a result, in just spending hours of mowing, we saw that there's a lot of damage that's occurred to the different monuments throughout time. A lot of our monuments are 100, 150 years old. They've been here for a while, and with the weather conditions and whatnot, they've fallen over, they've gotten damaged, and we had a need to start addressing these in terms of maintenance and repair, and try and just preserve what we have within our cemeteries. And a lot of folks come and visit the cemeteries, they walk around, and if they see a stone that's fallen down, we really don't know what to do with it. So Kathy Rankin and I went to a training session last year in June down in Gloucester, Massachusetts, and it was hosted by two gentlemen from the National Parks and Recreation, National Parks Restoration and Reclamation Department. And those folks put on a 2-day workshop for us, and they showed us different materials to use for the repair of stones, how to go about raising stones without doing damage, how to reset stones depending on the type of stone design it is. And it was a hands-on workshop, so that's where we really got our start in this whole process. When we returned, we went to the town, and the town was gracious enough to provide us with some tools and a trailer to put our equipment in. And in the fall of last year, we started going around to our different cemeteries and started working on the repair and restoration of the broken and damaged stones. And since that time, we've done a lot of work over in the South Wolfeboro Cemetery and here at Pine Hill. And Pine Hill, for those of you who don't know, there's a section of the cemetery that's fairly old, and that was obviously the part of the cemetery that had the most damage. And so that's where we've been focusing our efforts at this point in time. And we have no stones left on the ground. Happy to say they're all up and now back onto their bases. The stones that were broken have been glued and repaired and put back in place. And we are now going the process of straightening the leaning stones. And throughout all of this has been a cleaning and taking care of the wear and tear that's been going on with the stones. So we're cleaning, repairing, setting the stones back up, and basically just wanting to preserve what we have. For those of you not aware, when a cemetery plot is sold, the original folks had the option of going in for what's called annual or perpetual care, and so those were our focus to begin with, were the stones that had those markings on them. And since that time, we've kind of spread out, and we're starting to just work on every stone that we see that needs attention. Eventually, our goal is to hit all of the cemeteries we have in town. There are a total of 34, and our biggest one is Pine Hill. There are about 600 stones here, and we would like to eventually get every stone in this cemetery cleaned and set back up and in good shape, so that future generations can come through and look up their heritage, do some genealogy study, and find the cemetery in good repair that shows us that we have respect for those who came before us. Today's project is a stone that ended up on the ground because there was a pine tree here at one time. And so where I'm standing was at one point in time a pine tree, which our maintenance crew cut down last week. And the root system of the pine tree worked under the base of the stone, and with time, as the roots grew, lifted the stone up and it toppled it over onto the ground. So the first step was obviously cutting down the tree. And today we came out and we had to cut out the root system that was underneath the original base. We had to lift the base out in order to do that. And this is one of the pieces of equipment the town has purchased for us, and it's called a tripod with a chain fall, and it allows us to safely and easily raise and lower stones in a controlled way. So what we have now, the base has been prepped, it's leveled, and Kathy and I are ready to set it in place and give you a shot of what that looks like. I didn't know that stones in monuments were just basically set on top of one another. And there's a putty down here that is a water seal. And other than just making sure everything's level and placing the putty in place, the stones just sit there on their own. They're not glued and they're not held in place in any other way. So we're just going to set it down in place.
Maybe hand the mic back to
The resetting of the stone at this point in time, we'll trim off the putty at the bottom so it is good. We'll clean it, and it should be in a nice appearance and in a back to the way it was originally, and should be good for who knows how long. Hopefully another 100 years or so. Some of our stones, just as a trivia point, in our cemeteries are back from the late 1780s, is about the oldest stone I have found. Most of the stones in this area are from the 1830s, 1840-ish. So they've been here for 100, 150 years. And our goal is to preserve that for another 150 years or so that the next generation can come by and keep our cemeteries in good shape. So for cleaning our stones, you can see here Kathy is just using plain water, tap water, and a sprayer. And we use a plastic bristle brush and a plastic putty knife. And you don't want to use any abrasive cleaners, Comet, any type of chemical cleaner at all. So all we do is gently scrub and clean with water, and that takes off any of the biological growth and lichens and whatnot that have grown over the years, and keeps the stones looking good and prevents further damage from any of the biological growth growing into the structure of the stone and cracking the stone. The stone you have to think of as kind of being rather porous, kind of like a sponge. And if we let these different biological growths go into the cracks and crevices, they will eventually split and crack the stone and cause irreparable damage. And we can show you some of the stones that have been damaged from that. The question is, how long does it take per stone to do? It really kind of depends on, obviously, the size of the stone and the amount of growth that's on the stone itself. For the average size stone, generally speaking, I would say about a half hour per stone. We will then come back and make sure that after it's dried, we'll take a look at them again and see if they need any further work. In terms of how long it would take to do Pine Hill, as I mentioned earlier, there are about 600 stones here. So you can do the math. That's about 300 hours of work. So we have our work cut out for us. And again, this is our largest cemetery, but it's only one of 34. So now we've moved up into the oldest part of the Pine Hill Cemetery. And one of the things that I have been reflecting on as I work up here is that most of these stones were set in place around 1830 or so. And that was long before we had the age of mechanization. So every stone that's here was quarried in some remote area. Most of them are marble with a granite base. And the amount of labor and time and it took just to create this cemetery, then get the stones in place for the burial, just shows the respect that the people had back then for their family members and wanted to give them a nice resting place. And what we are attempting to do is return that resting place back to its original condition. As we have here is a stone that toppled over many years ago, and as it has laid on the ground for who knows how long, the marble stone has deteriorated due to the weather. And this stone's in very, very rough shape, and it's at a point where we don't know if we can actually fix it. but we will try and either preserve it in some way. We might create some type of a frame or weather enclosure for it. The stones we can repair, there's one over here. Yesterday we came out and cleaned the two mating surfaces, leveled the base, and then we use a special epoxy that's designed for masonry work, and we simply clamp up the stone and set the epoxy. So my favorite part of the day is to come back and take the clamps off, and we now have a stone back in place, and the next stage in the process will be to clean it and get it back to looking as close to its original shape as possible. So this is the first stone that we did back in the fall. It's of a veteran, and it was laying down in the ground, and it's on a granite base, and it has what we call a mortise socket that the stone fits in. And after getting the stone back up, we cleaned it and got it back in position so you can get an idea what the stones look like after they have been cleaned and back in the environment. The stones in this area here were our first ones that we did, and you can see how nice and white they have all returned back to their original color. If you take a look at the small baby stone, you can see that it's back to its beautiful original marble coloring. And this is a small obelisk that was very, very dirty, and today you can see it looks really, really nice. It's back to its original shape. So this is really what our goal is to get all of the stones that are here back to the way they looked when they were originally set. And that's what we're trying to accomplish here. So this particular stone is William N. Cook, and he was born in 1836, and he passed away in 1862. He's a veteran, and this particular stone was on the ground, and it was in a total of 3 pieces. And so what we ended up having to do was leveling off the base, and then as the sections came, we were able to glue them back together again using the tripod setup because it's a very heavy stone. So this now has been cleaned and will continue to be cleaned, and you can see there's a difference between the top section and the center section. So our goal will be try to blend in the coloring with additional cleaning and time and get it back to its original shape. But the big goal here was that stone was on the ground. It was on its way to just turning back into sand, and we got it back in position, and it's almost back to its original shape. So this is a representative of what one of our stones looks like prior to us coming and giving it some attention. You can see the outside has a lot of growth on it, biological growth. It is darkened and stained, and it is tilting. The base has lost its support. So we will straighten this stone up, and then my wife Christine works with me. She's a great help in the second pair of hands when it comes to using the pry bars and raising these back into position and getting our stone underneath it to give a good base of support. So Chris will come in after we straighten this up. She'll clean it and scrub it down, and you can take a look over here. Is a stone that we did this series of stones 2 weeks ago, and this stone was kind of in the same situation, but you can see how it has changed in terms of its coloration. We've gotten rid of all the biological growth, and it is coming back. With time it'll whiten back up. This stone was on the ground. It was broken in 2 pieces and out of its base, and that again is another one that we glued back together and cleaned, and you can see the difference between those two in terms of coloration and the appearance. Okay, through the town supplying us with the tripod and with the equipment we have, we are able to raise stones of this size. They're quite heavy. This is the first stone we raised last fall. It had been on the ground for quite some time. You can see in the back now we have put in some nice soil, so hopefully the grass will grow back for us. But this is the finished product. This stone is back in its original shape, and I would just like to thank those members who helped us get the equipment and just realize that we're putting it to good use. And again, our goal is to preserve what we have for future generations. And to tell you more about how you can get in touch with us if you have any concerns.
Well, first of all, thank you all for joining us as we showed you around Pine Hill Cemetery, and thank you to Ken and Kathy here for kind of giving us a tour and explaining what they've been doing and working so hard to get these cemeteries back up into looking excellent. If you do have any questions, concerns, anything about cemeteries in Wolfeboro, feel free to jump over to our website. On there, we do have a cemetery section which lists all the cemeteries that Parks and Rec is responsible for in the town. It also has some guidelines and different forms that you can check out. And you can always give us a call at the office, myself or Christine, at 569-5639. Thank you.